The real sounds of Africa to once again kick off our World Football phone-in. And this morning we're talking football in North and South America and players from over there playing in our leagues. In North America, representing the CONCACAF region, the Central America region, if you like, and Canada and the United States, well, the one and only Neymar, Major League Soccer king, John Arnold. Good morning.
Good morning, Dotun. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and we're going to give you lots of times to kick over all the difficult questions to our South American correspondent who will not know the answers, but at least he'll give it a go, I'm sure. Tim Vickery, the Legendinho, take care of any questions you've got from his base there in Rio on players from over there and playing in our leagues. Well, you know what I mean, don't you, Tim?
Yeah, good morning. I think at the moment I've got more than enough difficult questions of my own to deal with. So sorry,
well,
John. I'm going to have to build. I'm going to have to build a wall. Build a wall.
So the politics has already started. I'm going to kick off straight away. First question of the morning from Sir Ridge, who is a long-time listener from Winnipeg in Canada. He loves the show and all of you guys and Mina. My question is for the Neymar, John. In Canada, they've created a new league called the Canadian Premiership. I'm unable to find much information about the expected quality of the league. So far, I know they've only signed 10 players throughout the league, and most of them are veteran. MLS players or veteran MLS players or prospects who didn't make the MLS first teams. My question is, will this league be competitive with USL and NACL teams? Will the quality be on par, or is this league going to be far below that in terms of quality? Where can we expect the CPL to be on the soccer league pyramid?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the question itself sort of summed up some of the issues. This is the Canadian Premier League. They've done a lot of announcements. They're going to be starting play in 2019. I think it's great for Canadian soccer. From my understanding, the quality they're aiming for, and of course it's difficult because we've seen nothing on the field yet, and as mentioned, they haven't finished filling out the rosters. What they're aiming for is to be something similar to USL, the USL Championship, which is the new rebranded second division in the United States. It sounds like that's the level that they're aiming for. They want to be something just below the three MLS teams in Canada, Toronto FC, Montreal Impact, and the Vancouver Whitecaps. This is a place where, you know, if you were a Canadian professional who is up and coming, and you're not at the skill level of someone like Alphonso Davies, who just signed with Bayern Munich, or any other of the players who are able to get into those Vancouver or Toronto or Montreal academies, this is a place where you should be able to play. And it also gives a league, sort of a home league to the many, many Canadians playing abroad. So I think it's going to be great for Canadian soccer. I think it's going to be a place for a lot of young players to get minutes that they weren't previously getting. It's going to give a lot more opportunities to players who maybe weren't able to catch on that first time around. I don't think that means you should dismiss them. You know, I think it's easy to not make it at 18 and then bloom into a professional at 20 or 21. So I think it's pretty exciting. And it's also putting professional teams into markets where they haven't previously been in Canada. It's kind of sea to shining sea. There's teams in Halifax. There's teams all the way out near Vancouver. And there's teams in the middle in Edmonton and some of the other cities there in the middle. So I think it's pretty exciting. And we'll have to keep an eye on the actual quality once it's on the field. But they're looking to be, while not an MLS competitor, just below that level of quality. And we'll see how it turns out.
And before I forget my manners, the number to call if you'd like to join in this World Football phone-in this morning with any questions or comments of your own on football in North and South America and players from over there playing in our leagues. 08085909693 is the number. 08085909693. And we've got a season's greetings. We're officially in December over here, guys. I know you lot aren't. You're still in that November. What's November like over your way, by the way?
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself. We're in December. 10 minutes into December.
I'm still in November, and it's all right. It's all right.
How comes Tim's only 2 hours behind us?
It's bizarre. It really is bizarre. It's during your summer. It's the difference between us is 4 hours, and then you come off summertime, and we go on to summertime, and that means that the distance that now is just 2 hours. It's extraordinary. There is a huge Atlantic Ocean between us, but only 2 hours. But if I look north, The time distance now between where I am, Brazil and Colombia, Peru, and so on, it's 3 hours. So I have a 3 hour time difference from Colombia and a 2 hour time distance from you. I honestly can't make sense of it.
And does it affect the football?
there you go.
Does it affect the football particularly when people from
it
overseas?
makes it a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
Because we've got a final coming up of the Europa League equivalent, the Copa Sudamericana.
Well, I knew
and it's a team from Brazil.
I knew it wasn't the final of the Copa Libertadores. Boom, boom.
No, we'll get there, I'm sure. It's a team from Brazil against a team from Colombia. It's Junior from Barranquilla in Colombia against Atlético Paranaense from the south of Brazil. So there's a 3 hour time difference between those. So it's hard to find a time that is good for the audience in both of those places. Because if you kick off, the normal time for a big game in Brazil would be 9:45. That's very late, but but even that being so late, that's a little bit of a problem for Colombia, because that's 6:45. Which is very, very early. To get to the ground, or if it's away, even to get from work, and there is a problem there. It does make scheduling a little bit difficult.
As I was saying, the first season's greetings from Brad in from Brad. He says, I hope you're all well. I just wanted to ask the panel on tonight's show if they could each recommend a stocking filler for Christmas, whether it's a book, DVD, shirt, or trip to a stadium, please. Can we have your suggestions? I've put the Parma away shirt and a book about Gazza's time in Italy on my list. Tim, do you want to go first on that?
Yeah, it's a book I've recommended many times before, and I will not tire of recommending it because it's great. By David Goldblatt. The Ball is Round. It's a global history of football, and it has a huge virtue as a stocking filler, which is that it is a stocking filler. If you put this in someone's stocking, you won't have to buy much else because there won't be room for much else. Don't drop it on your foot, but read it, reread it, and then reread it again, because it's got everything you want to know there about the history of global football, and it's very, very readable. It's intelligent and very, very readable.
Just one thing. That's all. You're so stingy. You're only going to put one thing in my Christmas stocking.
I've got a salon to support. I'm sorry. If things were different.
He's got a good excuse, John. You don't. So please don't let us down now. What are you going to put in our stockings for Christmas?
Well, I'm going to be a little selfish and tell you what I want in my stocking. Pumas in Mexico City always have one of the greatest kits. Their logo is a puma with actually American football uprights in it because of the history that university has. It has a long tie with the university with American football. But the logo is beautiful, and they released a shirt this year for Mexican Day of the Dead, the holiday that is celebrated in Mexico, where instead of, I honestly can't even think of what they usually have under there, they put a little crossbones. So it looks like a skull and crossbones, but the puma is there. And I think it's just it's sort of a cultural addition to what's already one of the most beautiful shirts in my region, if not the world. A book that is not out yet, but will be out in March. I'd love a gift certificate. My friend Matt Pence, a fantastic reporter up in Seattle, wrote a book called The Sound and the Glory. It's about the Seattle Sounders and how sort of they've become so relevant. We talk a lot on the show about just the culture of American football support and how Seattle and some of the other cities in the Pacific Northwest, Portland, Vancouver, have become these sort of bastions of soccer fandom. He's done that, chronicled that, and I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. So that'd be a great gift as well. That's what I'm hoping gets in my stocking. Dotun, for you, you know what? I'll get back to you. I'll send you something for sure, though.
Look, in the words of Kevin Keegan, or to paraphrase what Kevin Keegan would probably have said, I would love it. I would really love it if Puma was sponsored by Adidas. I would love it. I would really love it.
They're Nike.
Well, as long as they're not, it would have been much more ideal if it was Adidas because of the two brothers, in Germany who built opposing plimsoll factories across the river from each other. Anyway, but yeah, Nike. Okay, why are they not sponsored by
Between
Puma
the brothers,
anyway?
Kay.
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. It could be, Nike has, being an American company, has a very strong hold on a lot of the sporting teams here. Although MLS is with Adidas, so I don't know. Missed opportunity, Puma.
So Admiral haven't got a chance in breaking into the US market then?
No.
Oh, what a shame. What a shame. Won us the World Cup in 1966, they did, so let's not have too much laughter there. Alan is with us in Belfast.
Was that Umbro? Was it Umbro? Was it Admiral?
No, it was Admiral.
I remember Admiral in the 70s when all the piping, you had the...
Umbro came later.
66.
Yeah, I'm sure Admiral was 66. Somebody will tell us by text on 85058 or email up all night at bbc.co.uk. Alan in Belfast, good morning.
How you doing, Don?
Very well, sir. Good to speak to you.
Yeah, I've got several questions actually. I do have to declare one or two interests.
Well, of course, we all do, one time or another. Yeah.
The main one is I'm a big fan of Liverpool FC.
Nothing wrong with that. We've got a date with Destiny this weekend, haven't you, with your Merseyside rivals?
The Merseyside derby, it should be good. Sunday, yeah, it should be good. So the kind of main reason why I'm phoning tonight is to ask John Arnold one or two questions about the MLS. I go to try and get over to USA every 2 or 3 years, and I was there in August this year, and I got to see Colorado Rapids in Denver and their game against Real Salt Lake, and that's my first have to declare an interest. One of the Colorado Rapids team is called Danny Wilson, who used to play for Liverpool and then went to Rangers, and then has made his way over to Colorado Rapids. And also the other interest is the Real Salt Lake team had a player called Brooks Lennon, who also used to play for Liverpool at one stage, but I don't think ever played a first team match. So the question at the time is to ask John Arnold about why Colorado Rapids have become so bad. The last time I saw them was 2 years ago, and I think they won quite well 2 years ago. And the time I went to see them in August, they got beat 6-0 at home. So the question is to John Arnold about why have Colorado Rapids gone. Was that a
fluke?
A typical match for Colorado Rapids, or was it one-off? Or
yeah, well, they weren't losing every match 6-0, but it felt like it was close at times. It's been a really disappointing past couple of seasons for Colorado. They hired a new manager before the season, hoping that they could kind of turn things around. Anthony Hudson, who used to be the New Zealand national team manager, and before that was Bahrain.
Alan Hudson's son.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say has a strong England connection. It didn't really work out. Now, some of that could be, trying to get an identity on the team. It's his first major job as a club manager. He's managed a few kind of smaller clubs in the past. I think the Rapids are going to stick with him and kind of give him a chance to maybe have a project. They traded for Kellen Acosta, U.S. international. There will probably be some offers in for him during this window, but if they can keep him, I think they do really well there. They experienced some success kind of with a midfield that included Acosta and several other players that could play sort of two-way. They almost had 4 two-way players in the midfield. It was interesting how it was kind of working together. Hudson wanted to play 5 at the back at the start, and I think he sort of realized maybe this isn't the best way to go with the personnel that I have on my side. But beyond just the Rapids, I think it sort of exposes the fact that they've had these difficulties, especially in recent years. It exposes an emerging gap that we're seeing in MLS. It's a league that's set up, as we've talked about, with a salary cap, trying to keep teams level, trying to keep parity in the league, and trying to keep everyone competing for trophies and kind of give everyone a chance to make the playoffs and be exciting and relevant in their market. I think we're seeing more and more now than ever a real distinction between haves and have-nots, and it really comes down to which ownership groups are willing to spend. Now, you might know the Rapids are owned by Stan Kroenke, who, of course, people are familiar with from Arsenal. He also owns Arsenal. So has a reputation there, I think, as someone who doesn't love to spend big. And that's definitely the reputation that he has from Colorado fans. So I think it's difficult to see Colorado and some other MLS teams closing that gap that now we've seen open up with teams like Atlanta, the Portland Timbers, who are in the MLS Cup final, New York Red Bulls, New York City FC, LAFC, even the Galaxy, who didn't make the playoffs this year, have shown they're willing to spend. So if those owners don't start to spend money, I think we're going to see that gap get bigger and bigger, and more seasons like this one for teams like Colorado. So, yeah, I wish I had better news for you, and maybe they'll put some investment in or try something innovative. But for now, it's difficult to see the Rapids vaulting back up to where they were, as you mentioned, a couple years ago.
Well, it's a tale of two Allens for our morning phone-in. Alan in Belfast, thank you very much for that. We've got Alan in Santa Monica with us as well. Hello, Alan.
Yeah, hello. Good day, everybody.
Good day. Wrong continent, I think, isn't it? For you?
Yeah, it's true. I was a bit confused as to what time of day it was, but I know it's the middle of the night for you. It's the evening for me.
We're more concerned about what time it is in Brazil. They don't seem to know whether they're coming or going in terms of how many hours they should be behind us. Get thee behind us, Brazil! Go ahead, Alan.
Indeed.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, no, I just had to. I ran back to today. I've been doing a lot of refereeing this week. I've done 7 games, but I have to share you this story from the game on Monday, just to show you just how the US is really embracing soccer and also embracing the World Soccer phone-in. So I'm at the game on Monday, and it was Westchester High School up against the Los Angeles Manual Arts College. So I went out there. Introduced the captains, talked to the coaches, and said to the coaches, will your teams be properly and legally equipped, and so on. And the guy, he turns around to me and says, it's a funny question, but he said, I recognize your voice. Are you on the podcast, the World Football Phone-In? Are you Alan from Santa Monica? He was a great fan of this podcast, and he recognized my voice at the coin toss at a game in Los Angeles. So the football is coming. It's coming home. Well, not coming home. It's coming to America.
But did he buy you a drink?
Not yet, but he will be listening to this, so I'm just going to give him a shout-out now. So it's the coach from the Los Angeles Manual Arts College, and when he hears this, I'm sure maybe he'll phone in as well.
Is it worth me flying over? When he hears my voice, he'll buy me dinner. Is it worth it? No, I'm only kidding. Tell me,
you go a long way for a dinner, wouldn't you? I know you.
You know me. Tell me this, Alan, because you initially said described it as the World Soccer phone-in over there.
Yeah.
Do we market it differently in the States?
No. That was me having been indoctrinated, having been here for 16 years. I can't say the word football. It's so hard. You have to be bilingual. We talk to you guys. My daughter plays in the UK now. She's at school over there, and it was the hardest thing of my life to try and say the word football as opposed to soccer. It's very strange. I've been completely indoctrinated.
Just tell your daughter it's football without the helmets and the padded shoulders.
Maybe I could add another point to this as well, that an interesting point, because she used to play the high school in Malibu, and now she's moved to UK. But I'm still involved with the high school, the old team she used to play. And it's interesting, the soccer team is doing very well, although with the fires it hasn't played for a couple of weeks. But the American football side is actually shut down. They're not playing American football next year at that high school because there aren't enough boys to play. But the soccer program is doing well. So there's perhaps another data point for you, how the game is evolving here at the kids level. The interest in soccer is very high.
Yeah, thanks for putting in the pronoun as well.
Can I throw a quick question to Alan exactly on this point? Because this is something that fascinates me, because it seems to me, and obviously you know much more about this than I do, Alan, that the constituency of the game in the States is more a middle-class constituency than historically has been the case in our cultures. And I wonder, with the health and safety thing and, the fear of head injuries, now that the US, as you are pointing out so well, is really getting involved in this, and there is a lobby there of powerful people, of people linked to powerful networks who may be concerned about head injuries. Do you think that this will be a force that may change things in football, either with changes to the rules or with head protection being worn in the next few years? Can you imagine something like that?
Well, yeah, definitely. So there's two sides to that question, Tim. The first is there's the lobby that is pushing against American football. So within the grassroots games on that side, there are kids moving to soccer as being a less violent, a less aggressive sport. So that's point one. The second point, though, is the point you're making, which is that you have a strong grassroots organisation that is pushing against the rules of soccer and saying, well, okay, yes, it's not as bad as people smashing into each other in American football, but it's still dangerous from a head perspective. And so you do find that at the junior ages, under 12, we don't allow heading. But that makes it very different. The game is evolving in a different way over here, and especially when you get to the high school and the middle school games, they don't know how to head the ball, and so it's actually a little bit more dangerous because you end up with people trying to kick the ball when it's high in the air and so on. So I do think that is evolving. At the moment, the pendulum swung too far to say, hey, for football, or soccer as we call it, we should put more rules in place. But I think that will stabilize over time. And the games that I've been refereeing this week have all been high school and middle school, and they do allow heading, and they're pretty intense. You have a lot of Hispanic kids, you have a lot of black kids, you have working class kids playing it from the high school. It's not pay to play at that level, and it's good standard. It's aggressive. It's played aerially, and it's played at a high tempo. So I think there's a lot of grassroots games out there, and I don't think the soccer moms will change the game massively, although there is pressure to make that happen.
Johnny, anything to add to that?
Fascinating. Cheers, Alan. Fascinating.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is just before Tim brought up the head injury. I think there's a lot of people who are looking at American football and saying, I don't know if this is right for my kid. And when you add, the availability of soccer on television like never before, I think it's easy to motivate kids to get into it now, where maybe it wasn't so easy even 5 years ago. So I'm encouraged to continue getting calls. I know we've spoken before, Alan, just talking about how the game is growing. I think Southern California specific, very fertile. And it also, it sort of warms my heart to hear the mix of races, because as I've mentioned on this show before, I think that could be sort of the identity of the U.S. national team, and the women in many senses are ahead of the men in that aspect as well. So good to hear, and definitely seems like the trends that I'm seeing as well.
Yeah, 0808. Gosh, why do I get it wrong each time? It's not an easy one to do.
You can say Desakan Thiru Narayanapuram, but you can't do the phone. There's something wrong there.
Yes, it's the numbers, isn't it? It's a numbers game. 08085 909 693. I'm going to get you to do it next time. Johnny's not the only person that can pass the ball over to you, The ref can as well. You're so clever with numbers. Mike in Air wants to know how you think how do you think going to a one-legged final at a neutral venue will affect the final of the Copa Libertadores? You could tell us all about that in a moment or two.
Across the UK.
This is BBC 5 Live. Up all night with Dotun Adebayo.
Oh, not just with Dotun Adebayo, it's also with the Legendinho Tim Vickery, who's in Rio, and it is with our name John Arnold as well, who is in Fort Worth. Is it Fort Worth?
Just over in Dallas.
You're over in Dallas now.
Yeah, it's kind of the same region, but Fort Worth natives do get upset when you kind of lump it all together because it's its own city, bigger than
I can imagine. And what happens in Tijuana stays in Tijuana, even with this migrant caravan. I don't know if you've been following that. Yeah. Have you been over in Tijuana since they've been camped out in Tijuana?
No, not this time. A couple years ago I was there, and this community is still there, and they've sort of assimilated. There were Haitians that made it, a lot of them, actually, I believe from Tim's region, from Brazil, who then decided they needed to go to the United States for different reasons. I think laws changed in Brazil, and their status after that horrible earthquake, you remember, it was very easy, I think, for a while, or I don't know about very easy, probably not, but it was easier to get in the U.S., and they changed something. I'm not sure on the particulars, as you can tell. Anyway, all that to say, there was a large Haitian community there. Tijuana, a city of migrants coming together in a lot of ways, always been at a crossroads. It's been, there have been some great stories of how the city's welcomed those people. There's been some frustrating stories of how people have sort of lashed out against some of those people. What I can say related to the program is that they have a new manager, Club Tijuana, from my home city, Dallas. Oscar Pareja is going over there to coach the team. I think he'll bring a lot of joy to that city and hopefully give people of all backgrounds, ethnicities, nationalities something to cheer about. Obviously, there's much more serious realities at hand there, but we'll see if Xolos can kind of bring some joy to those people and provide at least a pleasant distraction for a while. For people who are dealing with difficult things.
So, Mike in air, Tim, asked that question about how you think going to a one-legged final at a neutral venue will affect the final of the Copa Libertadores.
Well, this is a controversial move which is coming in from next year. Next year, the final will be in Santiago in Chile. And it's seen as a shameless copy of what Europe does in a continent which is very, very different. And there are two huge differences. One is the distance involved. South America is huge and the travel infrastructure is nothing like Europe. Travelling around the continent is much, much more expensive than it is to travel around Europe. And the other thing, obviously, is the distribution of income. So, travel is more expensive and a lot of the fans don't have anything like the amount of money as European fans do. So you are removing fans from the biggest game that their team will play on their continent. It's always been a home and away final. So this is a controversial move, which is mainly being done for TV rights because they can get more money from a one-off final, which they can show at a time which is accessible to a global audience. They can get more money from a one-off final than they can from the traditional home and away type thing. So very, very controversial, but what has happened with the River Plate Boca Juniors final has just turned out to be a wonderful advert for the one-off final on a neutral ground because South America has proved incapable of staging that game or incapable of staging that game on a home and away basis. So it's a change now which gains political force. And this year we're in the situation of the second leg of this year's Libertadores final being played in Madrid, which is an extraordinary turn up for the books, but is the consequence of exceptional circumstances, which we can get into if people ask about them.
Is that going to happen then in Madrid?
In Madrid, yeah. Where's the Generalissimo? In Madrid, yes. Boca and River Plate play not this Sunday coming, but the next Sunday the 9th, in Madrid. So South America is, and remember that the name of South America's Champions League is the Copa Libertadores, which celebrates the efforts of South Americans, Bolivar from Venezuela and San Martin from Argentina, to win independence from Spain. So it's a huge irony that the final of the Libertadores goes back to Spain, and it's really, really putting noses out of joint. But this is a very, very complex situation. It would take me ages to unravel all of this, so I'll do it if there are questions about it.
Well, we can wait. Just take your time. Put your feet up, Johnny, because it's going to take ages. No, I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding, Tim. We'll wait till people ask. What you think? I'm going to let you have that much time, extra time? It's not that kind of a game, mate.
No, well, this is a phone in, and people phone and they text and they send in emails and we respond.
You're skillful enough to bring in different aspects of it as you go along. You don't have to throw it all in one go, all your eggs in one basket. And then before you know it, you've got to switch tactics from the old 4-4-2 to the old 3-4-1-1.
It's a hell of a big basket as well. And that really, the Libertadores final, it really does require the chairman of the board approach. Give me just a little more time. Wow. And because I can't do the brrrr thing thing, it's quite difficult.
Or as Linton Kwesi Johnson would have said, we need more time. We need more time. I can't remember the rest of it. Oh, what a shame. Anyway, as I was saying, John, how's your Spanish skills, your Spanish language skills? Still okay, yeah?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Because you got some translation.
All right.
Yeah. Saludos.
Greetings.
Right. That's all you had to do for now. You never
All
know.
right.
You never know when you're going to need it, eh? You never know. You just never know. So you've passed the first test, your language test. Let's get on to the football. David in Mexico? Is it Mexico?
Yes.
All right, because he says David in Mexico. You see, you failed. You got one and you lost one. Great show as always. Quick one for the Liga MX. How does John see it going? Is it Cruz Azul's year, 2-0 up, home leg to come in the quarter against the White Cocks of Querétaro, up the Maquina, up the Villa?
That's a fair translation. I've always translated as White Roosters, but yeah, sure. The White Cocks of Querétaro. I think Cruz Azul is through this round, no problem. Their defense has been phenomenal this year. They've only allowed 13 goals. I think the next closest club allowed at least 17 or 18. I think it'll get much tougher for them. Obviously, that's how tournaments are supposed to work. But as they go into the semifinals and the final, I think it'll be difficult. This is a team that we've talked about before on the show, a team that's been so famous for almost winning and then snatching defeat from the jaws of victory that Cruz Azulear is another vocab word you can add. That's to Cruz Azul or to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. So I think this might be the year. I don't know if I'm cursing them or if I even have that power for a team with so much bad mojo that hasn't won a Liga MX title since 1997. But I really like them this year because of their defense, because of how good they are at the back. And they still have a couple threats going forward to really stretch teams as well. So they're my pick for the title. They're the number one seed. They're the super leader for a reason. I could also see America causing some issues, although I think they have some issues of their own. And I really think that whoever comes out of that Santos Laguna Monterrey series will cause problems as well. Tigres with Andre Pierre Gignac, Mr. Liguilla, they call him because he's so good in the playoffs. He didn't have a great game in the first leg. We'll see if he scores on Sunday in the second leg of that tie. I think they'll get in gear, but I don't think this is the same Tigres we've seen. I think their defense is much more susceptible than it has been in previous years. So I don't really love them. I go with Cruz Azul as my favorite to win the title with America. Second could be a Mexico City final, which would be very exciting. I think we spoke with David before, and he lives in Mexico City, so maybe I'll run into him down there if that's what comes to pass. But that's kind of how I see the Liguilla. It's a very exciting time. If you can tune in for games, I know the times don't work well in the UK, but they've been fun. They've been fun so far, and it's only going to get better.
And what about Arriba?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's go. How about La Bamba or La Bamba?
You have to have a little bit for that
one. Very good.
Okay, this one is as you're in Dallas, Texas, John. This is from Rohin in Dallas, Texas. It's for both of you, so listen up, Mr. Vickery. I wanted to ask both of you about your favourite football-related conspiracy theories in your regions, and if there were any that you actually believed in. I'll tell you what, let's hold that one and come back, because Rohin can ask that question himself. Thankfully, he's given us his email and we'll be able to get him to come up so he can tell us exactly where he is in Dallas and exchange views with you. Ooh, and you can tell him where you are in Dallas. You never know. You could be next door to each other. That would be funny, wouldn't it, John?
It would. I know my neighbors and I don't think that's them, but, yeah.
You never know. Remember conspiracies. You just never know, yeah?
The JFK one here, then there's the,
Wow. We were going to start with that, actually. I was going to start with that. There is a magic in this.
We're turning into Dealey Plaza as we go, aren't we?
Exactly. Well, do you want to do the commentary as we turn? Okay, we've got Rohin with us. Hello, Rohin.
Hello, guys. How are you?
Very well, thanks very much. I didn't think you'd be so tired, Rohin. What have you been up to?
Full day of work.
Yeah. Did you bump into John Arnold at all at work?
No, but I heard he's in Dallas. I've only been in Dallas a couple of weeks. I used to live in New Jersey.
Oh, okay. Well, it's because you were talking about conspiracy theories, and we've been looking for John Arnold here, there, and everywhere. Did you search in that book depository for him?
I searched all through Dallas, actually. Can't find him. I think he's hiding somewhere.
There you go. Anyway, great to have you on. Why did you want to ask about conspiracy theories? Is it because of Dallas?
No, enough has to do with Dallas. I was just reading about it earlier today, and I figured that there's probably some stuff that Tim and John know. But, I wanted to ask the host if they had a favorite football conspiracy theory from their regions, or one that they truly believed in would be best. I can start with my personal favorite, which was one that was reported by two newspapers after a 2015 Champions League match between Chelsea and Barcelona. The theory that for that match, Jose Mourinho had a stadium ban, but the theory was that he snuck into the dressing room before the game in a laundry basket for pre-match and halftime speeches. Believers of this theory often cite that right before all of Chelsea's substitutions, the goalkeeping coach went down the tunnel and came back out, and then Chelsea did the substitution.
Did he come back out with a couple of towels? Do you believe that? Do you believe in that one?
I didn't before I heard about the goalkeeping coach going down the tunnel. I think it's hard to deny it once you hear that. I don't know if it was a laundry basket, but...
No, it makes sense for the laundry for me. What about you, Tim? Do you want to take him to the cleaners? Do you believe it or not?
Well, there was very, very recently, in the first leg of this Libertadores final, it was at Boca Stadium, and River Plate's coach, Marcelo Gallardo, was banned. So he can't be in the stadium. And as the River Plate delegation arrived at the stadium, all of their kit was searched, because there was a suspicion that Gallardo may have be smuggling himself in with a kit bag or something like that. So they were looking for him, to see if he was, because in the previous round he'd been banned, but he'd been able to watch the game up in the executive boxes, and at half time he just put on a kind of Inspector Clouseau disguise and wandered down to the dressing room and given the team talk. So there was a real fear that and so then he got a bigger ban. He wasn't even allowed in the stadium. So there was this fear that maybe he's going to smuggle himself in. So every item in the kit bag, they looked through it on a Gallardo spot. And here in this part of the world, everything is a conspiracy. Just everything is this wild conspiracy. They absolutely love conspiracy theories. And there was a huge one which got massive traction about the 1998 World Cup final. When Brazil were absolutely massacred by France in that final. It was 3-0 to Brazil, 3-0 to France. And, Brazil were very, very lucky just to lose by 3. And the whole conspiracy that Brazil deliberately threw the game, it was all to do with the French elections, apparently. As if, the players in a World Cup final, with immortality is 90 minutes away, they're going to be interested in the results of the French election, as if they need enough money to throw the game. But really sensible people would believe that one, because they just couldn't believe that their side had been that bad. I suppose another one is the 66 World Cup. The goal that maybe wasn't a goal from Jeff Hurst, and the fact that the linesman was from the Soviet Union, a republic that had been overrun by the Germans, and maybe that had some part to play in the fact that goal was given. But I suspect there's much more than that, much more in that one than in the idea that Brazil threw the 1998 World Cup final.
How about from your region, John? Which are the conspiracy theories that you've heard of, whether you believe in them or not?
Well, I like that you believe in kicker. I think that's fun, and I don't really believe in any juicy ones. There's a lot of stuff with MLS because of the control they have. When Jermaine Jones signed, it seemed pretty clear that he was being sort of guided in the direction that he chose. The biggest plot, I guess, that I think actually exists is with the Mexico national team. They're two gigantic television companies that show Mexico national team games, Televisa and Azteca. Televisa is the larger one, and I'm not even sure it's a conspiracy at this point, because the new president of the Mexican Federation, Jan de Luisa, came over directly from being a vice president for the sporting side of programming at Televisa, basically saying, this and that they run and make all the decisions there. But I have heard, tale, and people often speculate that certain players are being named to the roster, not because the manager wants them or not because of their skill, but rather because they're the ones who are in the commercials, they're the ones who are willing to do appearances, that sort of thing. For like a World Cup, I don't know if I buy that, but I definitely think there's some heavy influencing, heavy suggestion at times from some of the television sponsors and even the apparel manufacturers as well in different places. That's one that I hear a lot and do wonder if maybe not a direct, you must do this, but maybe some suggestion, some pressure perhaps from those people. But Televisa controlling the national team is something that people talk about a lot in Mexico, and it's something that, to be totally honest and frank, I have to say I do believe in.
Okay, there is one conspiracy. By the way, Rohan, do you believe that one?
Maybe not. I maybe need some more proof for that one, but...
Okay. Did you believe any of the Tim conspiracy theories?
I don't think Brazil would throw a World Cup final, but I like about the first one how widespread Mourinho's influence seems to be.
And the 1966 one, the Russians had it in for the Germans, apparently. Do you believe that one?
It's too far before my time.
I know. But basically, the theory is England wouldn't have won the World Cup if it hadn't been for the Russians. It's a kind of conspiracy theory that Donald Trump might give credence to. Anyway, there is one conspiracy theory that's making its rounds in North London. See if you believe this one, Rohan. By the way, who do you support?
Well, I support New York Red Bulls.
Okay, well.
It's been a tough week, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. Sorry about that. Did you fancy any teams over this side of the water in the English Premier League?
I mean, you always like to watch the good teams like Manchester City, but not anything in particular.
Okay. Well, good, because you're neutral. You'll be able to tell me exactly what you make of this conspiracy theory. Making the rounds in North London. I do not know if it's true or not. Put it this way, it's making the rounds in the N7 side of North London, which, do the arithmetic. It's 10 ends away from the N17s, yeah? And it is that, Tottenham are building a new stadium. And apparently one of the workers there was an Arsenal fan, and he's done what they did to Babe Ruth. They've buried an Arsenal shirt in the foundations of the stadium. Why are you laughing, Tim? It's no laughing matter, mate. It's no laughing matter. Do you believe that one, Rohan?
That one I can believe. That's happened so many times in the U.S. And it's happened before that a construction worker drops something in, but it actually messes with the foundation. They have to tear down that part again and just take it out.
If they have to tear up the foundations of the Tottenham stadium, the whole neighbourhood will crumble. We're dependent upon that stadium being built soon. It's my neighbourhood. Anyway, it's been
maybe
good.
Another year in Wembley.
Yeah, exactly. Another year in Wembley. Dear. Rohan, thank you. It's been real good fun. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was great. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, join us anytime,
Absolutely.
Yeah, always contribute with a great question. Thank you. We've got Stuart in Nova.
I thought you'd mention the worldwide conspiracy against Charlton Athletic. I thought that would be high up on your list.
Listen, it's not a worldwide conspiracy, it's a Belgian conspiracy. Let's leave it at that. I don't want to lose my, visa to Belgium forever and ever and ever if I start that one. Anyway, Stuart in Nova Scotia is with us. Hello, Stuart.
Hey, Dotun, how are you?
I'm very well, sir. Good to speak to you. You got a question of your own? Yeah, go ahead. You got a question?
Yeah, I would a quick hello to Tim, of course, but I got a question for John.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's about the Canadian Premier League. Of course, the Canadian Premier League's not actually going right now. It's going to be next year, but all of the 7 teams that we've got to start the league made a few signings yesterday. So all of the teams have got a few players coming. I'm just wondering if John knows anything about any of those players or his thoughts on just the general standard of players that have been signed. I'm a Halifax Wanderers fan. We signed a young lad, Zachary Secunda, a young Canadian guy, who was plying his trade there in Sweden and then in Australia. And he's the kind of guy, of course, that the league set up, to cater for young Canadian guys, coming back to Canada to play football. I was wondering, does John know anything about any of the players, or what's his thoughts generally on the progress of Canadian Premier League so far?
Why don't you ask him yourself?
I just did.
Oh, right. Okay. I thought you were asking me to ask him. Apologies.
No, Don, I'm not asking you. No.
You've cut me out of the deal. Okay.
As far as Canadian Premier League goes, I'm cutting you right out.
Yeah, I don't know.
If it was Charlton, it would be different, but I'm not talking Charlton. Yeah.
Thank you.
The familiar faces, I know Nick Ledgerwood, a long time, Canadian veteran. I think he has something like 50 caps for the Canadian national team. He signed for one of the teams, Calvary. I know him. Kyle Becker signed, who spent some time in my neck of the woods down in MLS. Randy Edwinibonsu as well, who kind of, I guess, an Edmonton lifer in some respects. You mentioned, these are the kind of players that are good for the Canadian League. It's these young up-and-comers who need somewhere to play and to improve and get competitive game minutes. And these veterans who I think can sort of show these guys the way and maybe didn't have those opportunities. I mean, even a guy like Atiba Hutchinson, one of the best Canadian players for the last 5-10 years, sort of underappreciated, never really was able to find, I guess, a home. He's talked about coming back to MLS, but it's never really worked out. I mean, he has a great standard in Turkey and that sort of thing. So I think this will be a real positive for Canada. And just the enthusiasm we had, the fact that we have a couple questions tonight about the CPL, the fact that they're putting teams in places where you traditionally haven't had professional football, I think is enormous. Look, it's long term, but if a kid is 7 years old and goes to a couple games this year and starts to fall in love with the game, starts to kick around, is able to use indoor facilities that I know Canada's building to kind of combat some of the weather issues, sort of like Iceland did. That's huge. And I think the Canadian national team's development will help on the men's side. The women are already a functioning powerhouse, but the men, with this generation that's coming through, you look at guys like Alphonso Davies, Jonathan David, Kyle Larin, if he can kind of get back in good form. Some of the other guys who are played in that Toulon tournament where Canada really showed well for themselves. I know it was a disappointment that the U20s weren't able to qualify for Poland, but just the fact that there's sort of a new young generation for Canadians and players like Davies to look to, but also that they're playing in their communities, I think is going to be enormous. I really do think that Canada's been a sleeping giant for a long time for a number of reasons. I think it's going to wake up. I mean, I think the CPL is probably going to be a big part of that when you look at the opportunities this can provide for players, and just the fact that it's going to get people dreaming. I think it's huge. So, best of luck to Halifax for sure. Best of luck to the entire league. And like I said, I hope it's the standard of USL and can push people to get better in all aspects of North American soccer. I think it's going to be a really positive development.
And Stuart, the question back to you, what's your opinion of the Canadian...
was on saying that he thinks people are going to be surprised by the standard. And I mean, I don't know about the standard for the first few years. It might not be like awesome, but I think, it's a work in progress. It's a growth thing. And I mean, I agree with you, Sleeping Giant. I mean, there's so much potential here. And the fact it's getting going, it's getting off the ground. I mean, it's we can go places. We can definitely go places.
I hope you do. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks for the call, Stuart in Nova Scotia there. Quick question for you both, gentlemen. Fraser in Glasgow sent an email. It's a good one. He says, I'm wondering whether the panel think it would be a good idea to have a transfer window for football managers, or if you prefer, football coaches, perhaps before the transfer window for players. Would this give a manager greater job security, or would this encourage clubs to change the manager more frequently? I'd be interested to hear any other interesting implications that this change may cause. Should you wait a moment to answer this one? Is it worth leaving it until after we've done the 3 o'clock news, Tim?
I think so. Yeah, let's give it the attention it deserves.
And John, you fancy leaving it, or do you want to answer it now?
Let's have a longer chat about it when we get back.
Okay. And when I say 3 o'clock news, obviously for those of you listening in Brazil, it's the 1 o'clock news. It should really be the 11 o'clock news, but for some reason it's only the 1 o'clock. 2 hours. You're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean if you're 2 hours behind us.
End of days. 5 Live's newest podcast phenomenon.
At one point, you just see the whole thing crash.
The FBI has told us that they are using non-lethal tear gas.
The untold story of how 30 cult members from Britain ended up on a ranch in the Texas desert. End of Days, the podcast.
Classic American story of religious cult gone wrong.
Available now exclusively on BBC Sounds.
08085 909 693. 08085 909 693 is our number if you'd like to join in the World Football Phoning this morning. So we're talking football in North and South.
08085 909 693. I'm trying to learn the number.
Yeah.
To see if it's just as hard as you make it every week. 08085 909 693.
How many years did it take you?
It didn't bite me.
How many years did it take you to learn how to say Desikan Thiru Nauna Puram? For years, I didn't take the mickey out of you, did I? I never took the mickey out of you. Okay, I bullied you a little bit about it, but I never took the mickey out of you. There's a big difference, mate. You can't, mickey taking is the lowest form of wit. Do you know that? Did anybody ever tell you that?
No, I agree.
Yeah,
the only thing I have to say in response is 08085 909 693.
You
was
did
my
so
number.
well. You did exactly, and mine was 5446, as you know. Right now, though, someone else has got that number. Is it you, John Arnold?
Well, no, I haven't gotten any calls on that number.
You haven't got any calls.
Give it to him 4 times. That's the only
I'm only
response.
going to give it to him 1 time. You give it to him 2 times. We could be here all night, you know. Oh, for goodness sake. 08085 909 693 is our number.
Oh! Glory.
I will give it to him 4 times in a second, I'll say that. For those who know Toots and the Maytals. So we're talking football in North and South America. You can text us on 85058. You can email up all night at bbc.co.uk. Really is a good question, though. This from Fraser in Glasgow. I'll reiterate. Fraser in Glasgow says, does the panel think it would be a good idea to have a transfer window for football managers? That's not the game. We're talking about the coaches here. Perhaps before the transfer window for players, which we know is the fun part of the season, isn't it? Coming up soon. Would this give a manager greater job security, or would this encourage clubs to change the manager more frequently? I'd be interested to hear any other interesting implications that this change may cause. Who wants to go first?
I'll take it. You know what I think that this could lead to is more happiness among footballers, which I think would be a good thing. I'll tell you why, because so many times a player comes to a club and they sign and they're part of a project that a manager is designing. Maybe you're a very fast winger and the manager wants to play fast wingers on both sides. And maybe results don't go your way. You know, we've seen this story a million times. The manager gets fired or leaves of his own accord and you're stuck there. Well, if the next manager wants to play with wingers that want the ball to their feet instead of to space, and you don't fit the system, then you're on the outs and you have to wait until the next window. The manager can go anytime he pleases, right? Or anytime the club decides to give them their marching orders. If the managers could only move during this window, I think it's a really interesting idea because, I mean, if that's what we enforce with players, why shouldn't we expect the same thing from managers? You're committed to a club for this long, and if it doesn't work out, maybe it doesn't work out. And that would be sort of the question, right? What happens then when it's not working? But I do think that so many times we see a player fall out of a manager's plan and lose up to a year, sometimes more of his career. And that can be harsh because, this is a game where if you're fortunate, you'll be able to play it as a professional until you're 35. And after that, you got to figure out some other way to provide for your family. Sure, there are some who are lucky and are able to make so much during their career that they're able to live off of it. But a lot of players, especially in places like Central America, where they're barely making enough to get by during their career on the salaries that they get from the clubs, it can be very difficult, to then need to bounce back for a season. And you lose a lot of time is what I'm trying to say if you don't fit with the manager. And if managers could only move during that time, it would be a really interesting solution. I think players might be happy with it. Now, the managers, I'm not so sure. I think the question, would it lead to more moving? I don't know about firing, but I think managers would be maybe having their eyes open a little more like players do now. I think we'd see a lot more changes. But like I said, I think players might benefit from something like that, Tim.
I think you make a really interesting point. And my nephew, who many listeners will know, his trajectory, professional football trajectory, was signed to Peterborough at the age of 17. Got played was first choice right back, whilst the manager that signed him was there. The manager got sacked after about the 10th game of the season. So he's got played. He was first choice right back for the first 10 games, let's say, of the season, maybe about 7 games of the season. Manager gets sacked. I think it was Dave Robertson was the manager's name. I can't remember. Manager gets sacked, and my nephew gets put on the bench because the next manager that comes in doesn't want youngsters in defence. He wants, a much more mature and experienced players because, like Alan Hansen, he doesn't believe that you can win anything with kids. And that has happened to him a couple of times in his career, 2 or 3 times in his career now, and it's made it very difficult for him. But although it would be great for the players, and John made that point a couple of times, Tim, great for the players, not so great for the chairman if the team's losing and he can't sack the manager.
Yeah, there is a fundamental difference here between players and the manager. You have, at the end of the transfer window, you have your squad of players. So, if one player isn't working, well, you drop him and you've got others to bring in and replace him. But that's not the same with managers. You've only got one. And you have to be able to fire him if, at your discretion, it's not working. So I think there are other things that you can do to improve the job security of managers. And one of those is to prevent them working for more than one club per season. So you can stop them transferring, for example. And here in Brazil, it's absolutely frequent to have coaches who, during the course of the season, will be in charge of 3 different clubs. That, I think, is foolish, and I think it should be stopped. If you can only take charge of one, I think that's something which helps the stability. Because let's imagine you can only sack your manager, you can only bring in a new manager when the next transfer window. You're stuck with someone that you're not happy with, or whose conduct deserves to be fired. You have to be able to replace him. So there must be some mechanism whereby you can get rid of someone who's not working. So I don't think on this one, I don't think that managers fit into the same bracket as a squad of players, although I am in favour of measures to preserve job security.
But why then? I mean, your reservations about managers being able to go from one club to another, why that reservation? Why shouldn't a manager be able to, like a player, go from one club to another within the course of a season? Why not?
Well, I just think that would be a better... Because if we start off here with our aim being to improve job security for managers, if that is our objective, then how can we achieve that objective? Now, I'm saying that the transfer window thing doesn't apply to managers in the way that it applies to players, because you've only got one of them. So I'm looking at another way. And if you can't move from club to club during the season, then that's one perhaps method of either giving opportunities to new managers who haven't already taken the charge of a club that season, or making clubs a little bit more reluctant to fire managers. Because if they're firing someone who they think is good and can do a job for another side, then I don't know. I'm getting a bit confused with this answer.
Yeah,
so,
okay. We'll come back to it. And if any other listeners want to join in this conversation as well about the possibility of managers...
I've sussed a number. I've sussed a number thing. The number thing is all about where you breathe. You got to, if you split it in two, if you go 08085 and then breathe 909693. But the problem is if you go into it not knowing where you're going to breathe. So it's 08085, breathe 909693. And if you do that, if you get the breath in the right place, you can't go wrong.
Well, that's not actually my problem, but thank you for the advice. Thank you. I'm very grateful. In fact, thank you. Thank you.
Thought long and hard about it.
Thank you. Thank you. But that's not actually my problem. But thank you.
For letting you be yourself again. I tried.
He thinks that I've only just started broadcasting the other day. He's teaching me how to breathe. He's teaching me circular breathing. Like I was just born the other day. He's teaching his grandma to suck eggs. Thank you, Tim. Thank you. But that's not actually the problem I have, okay? Thank you. Joel is with... Actually, before we come to you, and it's not Joel, I know it's OL. Before we come to you, OL, just a couple of jokes tonight. Tim's going to love this one, by the way. He's going to love this one. Let me take my breath. Let me use my breath properly in this one. I'm going to need it, aren't I? Yeah, I'm going to need it, Tim. I'm going to need this one. Oh, before we get to the Tim one, let's savour the Tim one. We'll come to the Tim one in a moment. Let's start with one for you, Joe.
God.
Well, I'm just going to enjoy it. I know I'm going to enjoy it. Yeah, but you've taught me how to breathe now. Thank you. Christina wants to know, though, John, whether she misunderstood the name or is there really a team in the States called the Colorado Rabbits?
They're the rabbits. Like a whitewater rabbit.
They are breeding even as we speak, those rabbits.
There's nothing funny about that.
Oh, well, no. We're just chuckling. Anyway, Julie wants to know if there's any truth in the conspiracy theory that Spurs owners don't want to be sued by the families of any fans who might have a heart attack if Spurs won the league. So the players are asked not to go mad with the goals. It makes sense to Julie. How was my breathing on that, Tim?
Yeah, I'm glad that you're still breathing. I'm all in favour of you continuing breathing. Can we agree on that one?
I appreciate that. Joel in Oakland, California is with us. Hello, Joel.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Doing fine, thank you very much. Appreciate the call as ever. Oh, good. Go ahead. You got a question or some comments as well?
Oh, just a comment and a question. The first one is I appreciated the guy from Santa Monica calling and his thoughts about the game in California, specifically at Manual Arts, which is a school that when I was growing up, I actually grew up in LA, and so my high school.
Wow, that's a school you went to, the same school.
Team,
oh, yeah.
No. My high school basketball team played against that high school's basketball team.
Oh, I get you.
The high school I went to had Westchester High was a fairly successful basketball team in Los Angeles and in California in general, to be quite honest with you.
So it wasn't Beverly Hills 90210. It wasn't that one. You didn't go there.
Oh, no. See, there's a lot of misconceptions about L.A., Dotun, and the first one is that it's not all sunshine and movie stars. There's
yes, it is.
a lot of real salt of the earth.
I've lived in L.A. The first movie star I saw, my first night in LA, when I was driving around to drive the 100 miles or so, or 50 miles, whatever it was, to the coast, I saw Charles Bronson in a red Mercedes. And I thought, yeah, I'm in Hollywood now. I just saw Charles Bronson. I saw him, and then I saw him later on. He had sat in a restaurant. I saw his red Mercedes again. He was sitting in a restaurant by himself, tucking into a Chinese or something or other. So, yeah, it is full of Hollywood stars.
Chinese Charles Bronson, the vigilante?
Yeah, that's the same Charles Bronson. Yeah, that was years ago. I lived in LA in 1990. So he was still around in those days. And then I bumped into Babyface of the music group, or the music producers, LA and Babyface, at a newsagent's. He came in to buy a couple of magazines, I made out like, I don't even know who you are. But trust me, I knew who he was. But, you can't turn around and say, wow, Babyface, man. Oh, I love that. Well, can we say the title of that track? The famous one that he did. Can we say the title of that? Well,
I don't remember, but
it had a whip.
He did have, I think his girlfriend his girlfriend Karen White went to my high school.
Oh,
back in the day.
And you say that Hollywood
Yeah.
is not full. You say Los Angeles is not full of stars. Come on.
Well, not okay. So they're out there, but there's a lot more to LA than just movie stars and models and palm trees. There's a lot of salt of the earth folks who are doing a lot of really good work, contributing to the community and pushing the envelope in terms of what's possible in the world, whether it's art or music or specifically sport. And I got to tell you that the fact that there's so much happening in sports in LA. I mean, you got pretty much the number one team in the United States, the football team, not world football, but U.S. football. The LA Rams is doing phenomenal. But the reality is that there's so much vibrancy there, and a lot of that vibrancy does come from the soccer community. And I got to tell you, that soccer community is not actually, contrary to what Tim had said earlier, it's not actually made up of middle class. It's really folks, working class, communities of color, Latino communities primarily. You look at LAFC, which John could tell you stories about. I mean, their supporters group is, oh my gosh, the next level. I mean, ask Nick Raimondo, the goalie of Real Salt Lake, how crazy their supporters group of LAFC can get. And so, but I just wanted to put that out there and ask you guys actually a question about tomorrow's big game, which you guys know about, right?
Yeah. Which game? Which one?
The biggest game, the women's under-17 World Cup final between Spain and Mexico, which is the furthest that Mexico has ever gotten in international competition in women's sports. And it's amazing. It's incredible. The people are talking about it online. They're talking about it in the news. It's being shown on major TV stations in Mexico, and it's creating a lot of buzz. And I got to ask a question, and that is that what can we do, or what is going on in other parts of the world, and not necessarily the United States, because obviously the United States is the powerhouse country in the women's game. Not necessarily in Brazil, because though they might be struggling right now, they still have the legacy of people like Martha, for instance, and their contributions. But in the Western Hemisphere, in the global South, what could be done to help further support the women's game and the women's game development?
That's a good question. And thank you also for briefing us on the situation in Los Angeles with regards to football. But John, do you want to take Joel's question first of all and tell us about this Mexico-Spain under-17 Women's Cup final?
Yeah, well, I think Mexico in some ways could be an example for what other countries might need to do or could at least explore doing. When you look at the roster from the 2016 U17 Women's World Cup, Mexico had 10 players based in the U.S., and everyone else was sort of made up from different clubs and organizations in Mexico. There's nothing wrong with that. And when I say clubs, I mean not professional teams. Last year, they launched the Liga MX Femenil, the women's league, and now you have women playing soccer full-time in the same sort of structure that the men's team are playing in. The games have been really well received. I've been really pleased to see the media coverage of them. And it's really given a lot of times girls, because a lot of the players are very young, including some of the U17 players. It's given them a chance. That's why when Mexico missed senior women's World Cup qualification for next year for France by losing in the CONCACAF qualification tournament, it was such a disappointment because this league had launched. But I think Mexico long term, when you look at this roster, as I mentioned, last time it was 10 girls based in the U.S. This time only 4. One of them is in the Arsenal system. One of them, I think, is playing in Europe. And the rest of them are all from Liga MX clubs and academies now. That's sort of the same thing that we see in the men's game, right, where the player production is a lot of times the responsibility of big professional clubs, and that's what Mexico is going through. So I wonder if the fact that these girls are able to make this historic run to the final, potentially even lift the trophy, if that could be a blueprint for countries, in Central America, maybe in South America as well, to make the commitment, to have the clubs make the commitment to mandate in many cases that you have to have a team. You have to field a team. Everyone's going to want to be competitive. No one's going to want to lose to their rival, whether it's a senior men's game, a senior women's game, a youth game, what have you. And so you have sort of the same competition that didn't previously exist in Mexico. I think if, you did the same thing in other countries, maybe you'd start to see the same success. So maybe a blueprint. I'm not sure. I don't think you can just plug and play everywhere, but I think it's a start.
Thank you. Appreciate that. 24 minutes past 3. You're listening to the World Football Phone. We're talking football in North and South America. Tim, did you add something onto that?
Yeah, I mean, we're making progress, but it's very slow progress. In fact, one of the places where there's been least progress has been Brazil. Despite the legacy of Marta, it's amazing how they've thrown so much of that legacy away. I think Colombia is making strong progress with the women's game. In the future, there's a regulation coming in the future that in order for clubs to play the Copa Libertadores, South American Champions League, you've got to have a women's team as well. Now, if that's taken seriously, that will give a big push, I think, to the development of structures, of being able to make a living from the game in South America, of having a structure and feeding people through that structure will do wonders. But at the moment, it's still a case, I think, in a lot of the continent of more potential than reality.
Great. And Carlo, thank you very much for the question as well. It's a good one. Lots of texts and emails to rattle through, guys. Given that the meat pie is the traditional fare served at football matches here, what would we expect to find in the Americas? It seems that's the kind of foodie question that our Sussex fan wants to know. John, do you want to go first? What kind of food would we find? What's the equivalent of the meat pie? The pucker pie? Other pies probably available, but the puckers, yeah?
No, you can't get a pie, no.
Well, you lot don't know what a pie is because you've only got sweet pies, haven't you? A pie for you is apple or blueberry, whereas for us it's savoury. You know what I mean? Well, it's both. We can do both, but you can only do one.
We have more and more savoury pies now. It's just that they don't taste as good as what you could get at a game here.
This is why we're called Great Britain and why your president's trying to make America great.
Yeah, I don't think that has much to do with the regional food variations. It really does vary by region here in the U.S. You've got I don't know. It's not I don't think people do a meal necessarily. I guess a pie is maybe kind of a snack, but hot dogs are available, hamburgers, that sort of thing. You get some popcorn, peanuts, what have you. In Mexico, for sure, it's a taco. There's also a lot of meat.
Taco, a football match. Well, it goes all over the place, doesn't it?
What's that?
A taco. Taco goes all over the place.
No, I mean not in the stadium. Outside, before the game, have a few tacos, or there's hot dogs in Mexico as well. Or different.
But what do you eat in the stadium?
Nah, I don't know. People don't really eat that much in the stadium.
You don't eat for 90 minutes. You don't eat.
Nuts, popcorn.
Popcorn?
A big pretzel. Yeah, popcorn. You guys have popcorn here?
Sweet or salty?
Buttery, salty. Yeah. And one weird thing in the Azteca, Mexico's famous stadium, you can get all sorts of things. There are taco vendors in the stadium. Hot dogs available for sure, but then they also have people selling ramen cup of noodle that they've boiled their own, and then they just sell it in the stadium. So if you're craving some ramen noodles in the stadium in the Azteca, you can find it. So
and with the popcorns, do people ever get into popcorn fights? Just chuck one popcorn over to somebody who's making a bit too much noise, and then before you know it, it's a full-scale Game of Thrones fight.
No, unfortunately, to be honest with you, in the last couple months, and Joel even mentioned Nick Raimondo, the RSL goalkeeper, he got pegged by some sort of item that came out of the stands. We've seen people throwing coins.
He got pegged by a popcorn?
No, not popcorn. Something much more sturdy, unfortunately. So people need to get that under rein. But not seen people throw popcorn. Only things that could actually injure.
I've been told, Tim, before you answer from your side, by Jack in Brighton, that I shouldn't forget to tell you that us old codgers want you to say the telephone number slower. So do you want to do it again? But slower for the old codgers.
08085 909 693. I'll
No,
say that again.
now do it slow.
08085 909 693.
Now do it slow.
How was that?
Now do it slow.
08085 909 693. Well, obviously, do you know that the hot dog was invented by an English person at baseball games, for baseball games? And he did all kinds of research to work out how could you keep the kind of meat thing in the middle, how could you keep it warmer for longer?
Was his name Nathan?
And he came up.
Was this Nathan?
It may well have been, okay. Perhaps. It certainly made its way down south, the good old hochidorgi, or the cachorro quente, which is a literal translation of hot dog. So that's probably towards the north. They've got some kind of more imaginative slacks. Paraguay is quite good because they have their kind of it's a kind of like bread thing, but it's got a nice tang to it called chippa. And I love the way that the salesmen in the stadium, they wander around with a basket on their head. A basket of these chipper things going chippa. It's always one of my favourite things about going to Paraguay.
Okay, look, in my honest opinion, I think Chris in Plymouth has asked the best question of the night so far.
It's a high bar.
Then let it be asked.
Well, I'm going to come back to it after the 5 Live headlines, but let me just say that the punchline is Sam Allardyce should be banned. Okay, keep that in mind, and we'll get the full weight of the question in a moment or two. You're both going to have to answer it, so think of that punchline. Sam Allardyce should be banned, okay? Yeah, that work for both of you? Do I get a yes? Yeah? Happy? Okay. Looking for, and you do know who Sam Allardyce is, don't you, John?
I do, yes.
Right, now I'm just checking. And Tim, you know who Sam Allardyce is, yeah?
Yeah, I know who Sam Allardyce is. I know. I didn't get where I am today without knowing who Sam Allardyce is.
Wait till you hear the question. It's even funnier than your accent. Well, football phone-in, it's American North and South with the Neymar, John Arnold, and the Legendinho, Tim Vickery, respectively. So American North and South, and of course, Sam Allardyce. So the conclusion is Sam Allardyce should be banned. What's the premise, Tim?
I don't know. I think about banning people. That seems a little bit harsh. So I want to see the evidence first.
Right. What's the premise, John? Sam Allardyce should be banned is the conclusion. What's the premise?
Gambling?
Why does your voice have to go up like that? Is it the word?
I'm taking a real stab in the dark voice.
Okay, I'm just checking. Well, no, the premise, according to Chris in Plymouth, is: do you think, out of fairness to all the clubs in the relegation zone, that the employment of Sam Allardyce should be banned? That's a fair question, isn't it? It's a good one as well. It's a good one. We've got Marwan with us all the way in Cairo. Good morning.
I'm Alexandria. Good morning.
Alexandria.
Yeah.
Okay, well, just on that question, can you tell us anything about the 19-year-old Manchester student who's been arrested in Egypt? Seriously, this is. Arrested in Egypt, accused of spying. Do you know anything more? Has it been covered in Egypt?
No, it's not covered, and it's not viral, I think, but I want to know about that. It's really not good at all.
Yeah, no, well, we've been covering it here. I was just wondering if it received any coverage in Egypt.
No,
okay.
No, it didn't. Is he English? Not Egyptian?
He's English, yeah, he's English.
Yeah.
He'd come to Egypt.
It happens a lot. We suspect, some and lots of Egyptians suspect that any foreigner is when we came from any agency of spying or whatever thing, but he's spying on us, and he's a foreigner who wants to disrupt the balance of Egypt, and it happens for a lot of people. So
because Mo Salah's
getting fearful,
Mo Salah's a foreigner, but he's not a spy.
Yeah, because maybe you are first world nation and we are third world nation. That may be a difference in how we think about.
No, but I was wondering if you guys thought that Mo Salah was a spy because he's a foreigner. You said that all foreigners. You said all foreigners are spies.
No, not all fundamentalist. Some people think like that, but it's not a majority. But some people, especially in the 60s of their years, think that they want to disrupt us. We are the greatest nation I've ever made, and they are destroying us. And it's not true.
It's true. It's true that you are one of the great nations.
Yeah, we are one of the great nations, but not everyone in the world wants to destroy us.
Yeah, no.
No, even a 19-year-old Manchester United fan. No, absolutely not.
I'm not sure if he's a Manchester United fan. I never said that. He's from Manchester, I said. Don't know if he's a Manchester United fan. But and you discovered some new tombs in Luxor as well, didn't you?
What?
You discovered some new tombs in Luxor, yeah?
What is it? I want to know. I'm really bad at following news these days. I have a lot of assignments.
You can't expect me to be giving you the Egyptian news.
Yeah, that's great. That makes you Egyptian. I'm giving you the Egyptian citizenship.
Well, I am a pharaoh. I am a pharaoh, after all. I am a pharaoh. I am a pharaoh. So you've got a question. Let's stick to the football questions then. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we all heard of the Boca River.
Tim, did you get that, by the way?
Fighting.
Did you get that? Tim, did you get that? I am Pharaoh in a Nigerian way.
Yeah, can't say fairer than that.
Finally got it. Thank you. Go on, you carry on, Maron.
So the Boca and the River conflict and how the game has been delayed and now will be played in Santiago Bernabeu. I want to talk about the thing that we here in Egypt have a bit of a conflict about. The fans, the really, really nasty, the violent fans. That made the goal, and they throw things into the Boca Juniors bus, and they made the game to be delayed. I don't know how we could deal with such phenomena. Here in Egypt, we just ban fans. It's not right. It's not right at all. But how could we deal with these violent supporters? In England, it had been dealt with. I don't know how exactly with the hooligans and the thing that happens in the late 80s and the 90s. But how can a nation deal with this amount of violence in just a football game? It's just a football game. Nothing happens if Boca loses or River Plate loses. It's just a football game. It don't need to see people killed, people just getting injured off a football game. So it's a thing here in Egypt, and we're calling for fans to get back, but they're fearing from higher up the ranks that this can create chaos and create these types of violent incidents. It's less than what happened in Argentina, but it could. So what can we deal with it?
How do they deal with it in the States first? Do you mind me if we go to John first, Tim?
Yeah, okay.
No worries.
Yeah, John, how do you deal with it in the States? Do you have much football violence in the States, first of all?
No. There's now and then something will kind of pop off. Generally, and this is true in Mexico as well, where we have seen more violent incidents, but generally it's not at the stadium or directed at the team. It's a fight between groups beforehand who sort of intermingle when maybe they're not supposed to. But in the U.S., the culture is definitely such around MLS, at least, where fans can mingle, often do. Maybe even the most extreme supporters invite each other sometimes to have a few drinks before the game and that sort of thing. So it's a different culture here. I'm sure Tim will touch on it, and I'll let him do so. But I think a lot of times the factors are from outside football. You know, it manifests itself in football, perhaps, but things start elsewhere. And
like what? What triggers off? What triggers off a confrontation?
Well, it can certainly be, and like I said, in the U.S., it's very infrequent, and I think often it's everyone's had a little too much to drink, or people are trying to prove something. People are trying to prove that this, in the U.S., in some ways, I think we have, look, soccer is not the most popular sport, and I think people are still often trying to justify their choice to love the sport, justify their choice to love the game, and prove that they're a real fan. And I think sometimes people associate real fandom with what we saw in Buenos Aires, what we see now and then in Eastern Europe, this sort of, we're breaking the rules, we're thumping our chests and that sort of thing. Luckily, like I said, I think it's a very small minority. It doesn't usually happen or spill over, I guess, in the U.S., but I think that can be a thing. But what I'm really getting at is, and like I said, I think Tim will probably touch on this, is that oftentimes there are societal factors that make it so that football is the kind of cauldron where these ingredients come together and starts to bubble over. Political situation, personal situation, economy. These things, I think, often come together and people don't know what to do with the feelings that they have or the frustrations that they have, and then kind of take it out on other football supporters. So that's what I would say about sort of the general topic of supporter violence in football.
How about in South America, Tim? What does it originate from?
I want to spend some time on this because I think this is, for me, this is one of the biggest stories in world football at the moment. For me, it just doesn't get any bigger than this. So I think this deserves some time. I'm just going to start off. A mate of mine, a fellow called Martin Fernandez, he's a kind of bin-stroke Uruguayan journalist, and he's just published something which, while we've been on the air, I've just been writing down, copying down, and I think it's brilliant. Because this decision to move the Libertadores final to Madrid is very, very controversial. And he's saying that, remember that the background to this story is that on Saturday, on the way to River Plate Stadium, the Boca Juniors bus was attacked. Players sustained injuries from cut glass and also were sustained injuries from the tear gas that the police used because the police lost control of the situation. So the players were vomiting because of the tear gas and pepper spray when they got into the dressing room, and some players, including the Boca Juniors captain, Pablo Perez, clearly couldn't play because he'd sustained an eye injury. So they've decided to stage the game in Madrid. And Martin Fernandez is saying that, you can criticise this all you like. But he's saying, but also, you've got to take into consideration that before taking the game to Europe, they tried to play the final in Buenos Aires with lots of undue concessions in an attempt to mitigate violence that was known to be uncontrollable. So the games were played, or tried to play the games in the daytime, not in the night, as would be standard, at the weekends without any visiting fans. And this attempt was sabotaged by those who should enjoy the privilege of being close to the spectacle. Players need to arrive alive at the stadium where they're going to play for their teams. If the price to pay for this is distance, then let's play the final in Madrid, in Doha, or on Saturn. And I think that's one of the best things I've read about it. It's just like a bath of common sense. Because lots of people have come up with indignation about, look, they're taking a game outside Argentina. But, are they going to take responsibility if someone dies, in the attempt to get this game on? No, they're not. It's just empty noise, from Maradona, in this case, Maradona moaning and moaning and moaning about it. But there is a real chance of fatalities if this game is staged in Buenos Aires. People have to take responsibility for that. The worrying thing here is not just the incident, not just the bottles and stuff being thrown at the Boca Juniors bus. It's the context behind the incident and also the response to the incident. And the context behind the incident brings us closer to Marwan's question, because it is a context of organised football violence. And this goes beyond, it goes well beyond misdirected passion, and it goes well beyond just violence. It goes to business. The organised thugs in Argentina, they make their living from being organised thugs. It is a profession. They have several streams of revenue. It's an informal tax that they charge on the players. In some clubs, they're even rumoured to get a cut of transfer fees. And, they'll charge an informal tax on the street sellers around the ground. And specifically, in this case, black market. They will get free tickets using their contacts in the clubs. They will get free tickets and they will sell them at a profit. Now, in this game, which is the biggest game in their history of club football in South America, there was a fortune to be made in the black market. The police cracked down on this operation in the few days going into the game. So what happened was a response to the police crackdown. So this is a context of business as well. And these organised gangs of thugs, they are so deeply rooted, not just these days in Argentine football, but in Argentine society. Power abhors a vacuum. And in the weakness of the institutions, these kind of rent-a-mob thugs have made themselves useful, starting from their use inside the politics of the football clubs, where the president is an elected position. So that means you've got politics going on inside the clubs all of the time, which means a rent-a-mob is useful. And then that rent-a-mob can be hired out for use in the normal political process, and so on. So that they've got top-level political contacts, they've got top-level legal contacts. They are a cancer. They are a mafia inside Argentine football. So how on earth do you deal with that? And what happened in England can't just be taken over to Argentina, because the problem goes much, much deeper. But there are some principles from England that can be employed. I mean, stadium architecture was one, and we can complain about it, but the stadium architecture did make a difference, as did stiffer punishments. But what was absolutely crucial in England, and is so often forgotten, is that there was a reaction from the supporters themselves. From the non-violent supporters, there was a reaction. They formed fanzines, and they used the fanzines to differentiate themselves from the violent fans. There was also a cultural shift, and I have to say, it had a lot to do with ecstasy. You know, suddenly football violence became a little bit out of fashion. You will never just change football with top-down measures. There have to be bottom-up measures. The base has to change. And it's here, when you look at Argentina and the problem of football violence, you can't imagine where the change is going to come from. In some way, the ordinary supporters have to differentiate themselves from the groups of organised thugs. Because those groups of organised thugs, they need the multitude in order to exist. In order to carry out their activities, they need the cover that's given to them by the multitude. So the organised fans have to find some way of supporting the ordinary fans have to find some way of supporting their team that breaks with a culture dominated by the organised groups of thugs who have just become a mafia. So that I think is the context behind the incident. Then after the incident, you get into one of the really big weaknesses of South American society, which is the failure to grasp a concept of common good. Everyone wanting to push things their way. And no one comes out of this well. First of all, on the Saturday, it was just clear, an hour and a half before the game, that the game could not possibly take place. Boca Juniors players vomiting, and especially the Boca Juniors captain with an eye injury, Pablo Perez, with an eye injury sustained from glass splinters, couldn't possibly play. But CONMEBOL, remember, there's a business side to this. They've sold the TV rights. They need the money, so they're desperate to get the game on. So the kickoff time is put back an hour, and then another 20 minutes, and then another 55 minutes. And then all of these deadlines have come and gone, and they still want to get the game on. They're still trying to get the game on. The referees are warming up, the pitch has all been prepared. The most disgraceful episode in this comes from the CONMEBOL medical staff, who signed a bulletin saying that the injuries sustained by the Boca Junior players were superficial and wouldn't prevent the match from going ahead. That's disgraceful. Pablo Perez went to the doctors the next day on the Sunday and was told, temporarily, you've lost 60% of vision in your eye, you shouldn't play because there's a risk of infection. So the fact that CONMEBOL's doctors were clearing him to play a day before is a disgrace. So you get that from CONMEBOL. Then you get from River Plate. River Plate don't want to be punished. They really don't want to be. They don't want to be punished. Now, remember that 3 years ago, these sides met at a similar stage in the same competition, at an earlier stage in the competition, and they're at Boca Juniors Stadium. As the players made their way back onto the field after half time, a Boca Juniors fan cut his way through the inflatable tunnel that's there to protect the players and threw pepper spray at the River Plate players. So they couldn't go on. The game was abandoned, and Boca were kicked out of the competition. So now Boca want payback. They want River Plate to be kicked out of the competition. Now there is a difference, because that incident 3 years ago happened inside Boca's stadium. This one was designed, and the organised thugs who did it knew exactly what they were doing. It happened 700 metres outside River Plate Stadium, where there is some club responsibility, but it's shared by a failed police operation. basic failure from the police. You've got to cordon off the streets around the stadium when the visiting coach is arriving. Just a basic failure, and that means that the responsibility is shared between River Plate and the Buenos Aires authorities. The head of security in Buenos Aires City resigned as a result of this. But Boca are wanting River Plate to be disqualified. River Plate don't want any punishment at all, and they've got to be punished. So everyone is pushing it this way and that. That's what makes the situation so depressing. And my solution, it's not a very popular one, was to play it in the Middle East. Given two things. Firstly, the winners will be playing in the Middle East, in the Arab Emirates, in the Club World Cup next month. So take it over there and play, and also just get it away from the supporters. Unfortunately, I think South American football culture has lost the right to stage this particular game. It has showed itself inept to stage this particular game. Take it to Doha, get it out, give a pause for reflection. But the long-term changes, yes, they've got to be legislative changes, but there's not going to be real change until the ordinary supporters find a way to differentiate themselves and turn their backs on the organised groups of thugs.
Thank you for that. Dave in Hales Owen wants to know why you affected a Yorkshire accent for Sam Allardyce.
Yeah, it was just a generic northern one, really. I couldn't really go further.
He's not really a northerner. He's from Dudley, in the Black Country.
Oh right, yeah.
You didn't know that?
Yeah. Sorry, but I've done that one to death, really, and time to get off that one, I think.
What about veggie burgers? Are they sold in stadiums? Janet in Rugby wants to know. Veggie burgers?
I've never seen one.
Maybe in the Northwest here or in LA, but they're not in wide circulation, I don't think.
Question for Tim from Moose on the M74. How is Alfredo Morelos perceived in his native Colombia?
Well, he got into the national team recently. He was picked. They played some games in September with the under-20 coach in charge. So he was looking at young players, and they picked him for September. But he didn't get picked again for October, so I don't think he perhaps did particularly well. But the fact that he's banging in goals in Scotland is on the radar screen in Colombia, and especially with the under-20 coach in temporary charge, that's a big opportunity for younger players to break in.
Yeah, talking of America, the politics of America, John, I don't know if you know that Kanye West song about gold diggers.
I do.
Well, because David Barth says, whilst we're on the subject of shouldn'ts, the American capping system, salary capping system, isn't that a bit non-American? And wouldn't they attract more players, thus have better leagues, meaning improvement of home players? World Cup winners maybe in 20 years if they did that, says David Barth.
Well, the concern there is... Okay, let's say MLS, and part of it is just, we've talked about before, that's sort of the most communistic almost league in the world system. It makes sense. It's very similar to what NBA and Major League Baseball and NFL do. But the concern with sort of developing talent, that sort of thing, is that if you said, okay, no more salary cap, well, it's not that the clubs would then invest in their academy and develop young American players, which would help the national team. It's that they'd then be able to spend however much they wanted to bring in Chicharito, Neymar, any player from South America. If, an owner was so inclined, that doesn't help the U.S. national team at all. We already know what Neymar can do. We already know what Chicharito, Ronaldo, Messi can do. So, while I do think that in some ways, MLS maybe could be doing more to help the national team, it's also not necessarily that its job. It's still focused on survival, making money for the owners as well. And the national team, I think it will be served by these academies that are coming and starting to really produce fruit. So, yeah, it is a quirk for sure because, typically it's kind of, the most capitalistic country, I guess, America, and we have sort of these restrictions against almost free commerce in MLS. But that's the paradox we find ourselves in.
And do you know what
isn't it just old style cartel capitalism?
Yeah, I mean, basically, but the thing is, I'm reading about a book right now about the USFL, which was a upstart American football league that tried to take down the NFL. and similar to the NASL in the 70s in the US, they just spent and spent and spent, and there wasn't the audience yet. They hadn't built sort of the ground, the framework, the fans. So I truly don't. Now I think MLS needs to start loosening some of the strings. But if it hadn't at the start, I mean, there was a moment in the late 90s, early 2000s where MLS nearly went under and declared bankruptcy, and that was even with all the measures they'd put on. So I truly don't think it would have survived without some of these tight controls.
Okay. What's the connection with Kanye West, though? Gold digger. Can you make a connection?
Someone's always there to give him money when he's in need. I don't know.
Oh, that sounds like a good line. Tim?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to plead being 53 on this one. That's a bit off.
I know.
I can do my toots and the Maytals, but you go on Kanye West, and I'm a little bit lost. Really.
I think it's fair to say you've rinsed out toots for one night. And by the way, Amanda's given us a suggestion for a book, a little book written for English learners, and it's called Football Cubs of South America. It's by Rod Smith. Do you know that book?
No, I don't. Cubs.
Yeah, Football Cubs of South America. I like it. It's published by Pearson 2001. It's a book for Christmas for younger people, I suppose. Guys, thanks very much. It's been fascinating.
Pleasure.
It hasn't been a pleasure. It's been fascinating. Let's leave it at that. Thanks very much.